You know, as a chef, moving out here to the Institute is so important to, get a better understanding of where our food comes from, right? Of like, how is this stuff produced? These guys and girls do, mostly girls. They do all the hard work. These might be the hardest working members of our team or creatures on our farm. Now, I didn't necessarily want to keep bees, but I wanted bees somehow, somewhere. I soon learned that if we were going to have bees on the Culinary Vegetable Institute property, those bees would be kept by me. Each hive, can produce like 60 plus pounds of honey for us in a season. We're really lucky to be on the property at the Chef's Garden where there's so many flowering plants. They'll come to the flowers that are giving. So like buckwheat, for example, where we'll go to is like, it gives its nectar in the mornings. And so they typically hit the buckwheat pretty hard in the mornings. This seems like one of those like win-win relationships too, because, we need the buckwheat as a cover crop. So why not plant something that's like beneficial for the bees as well? About once a year, we always tend to extract honey. It's a group effort. We bring in our friends to help. We basically will cap the wax off of the frames, we put it in this extractor, we spin it out into, a couple gallons, relatively speaking, of honey that will get us through at the Institute for the next few months. And it's such a beautiful, natural process. I just can't imagine a world where we don't have honeybees. I think there's this natural correlation with like the honeys in the season with the vegetables of the season, and I think that's really really special, and we try and do that as best as we can, and we'll demonstrate that a little bit today. We're going to keep this quite simple, but we're going to make it very clear, and hopefully in the end of the day we'll all learn something and be better for it. When it comes to honey, as I mentioned, we're going to show off a darker side, right? A deeper side of honey, and we're going to show off the like ethereal, heavenly, bright, white side of it as well. Something that kind of elevates you into another world. And I love them both, particularly together in contrast, as a way to show, parts to a whole. It's almost like we do with vegetables here at the Institute. We're working with multiple parts of a plant's life, or showing multiple stages, or showing its brightest moments and its darkest, deepest moments. That's kind of what we're doing here. So we're going to start with burned honey. We've probably got about 150 grams of honey. And we're going to bring this up to about 300 degrees. Okay, so while this is cooking, we're going to get into squash. Right now, the squash, as a result of the honeybee, the squash blossom as a result of pollinators as well, they really attract them. We're putting together a simple dish of burnt honey and squash, whipped honey and herbs. We give these a little score. It's going to kind of open up their surface area a little bit and allow for more browning. We're going to check the bricks on the honey before it went in. We're going to check the bricks on the honey now. We're going to add the appropriate amount of water to this to bring it back to fluid and roughly where we want to be. And we're at 81 degrees bricks. So quite high, we'll never freeze. So we'll see where we're at here. My guess is we're off the charts, and we'll add enough water to bring it back to 81 bricks. Yeah, we're off the charts. There's nothing to read here. We've added our water back, and we've cooked this caramelized honey down to right now about 230 degrees, right? So we know that the majority of the water has evaporated. We're going to be looking at something softer than like, syrup you might cook for a meringue. This is reading it's hot, but it's right around 80 and 82. It's kind of back where we started. We're going to just let this cool, and I'm going to add a little sherry vinegar to it, which is aged. You can do whatever you want here, but we're going to go with like a vinaigrette direction. This is going to pour over a heavily caramelized squash. Splash of that, we'll let that hang out. For the squash itself, we're going to go ahead and cook that. High temp, hard sear. Not a lot of magic tricks here. While that's happening, we'll get into our whipped honey. Whipped honey we take in 3 parts as well, almost similar to this. In this case, water, a very light, like spring honey, very floral, beautiful, and then Versa Whip. 4 grams of Versa Whip, 2 grams of xanthan gum. In our mixer, we're going to disperse water and Versa Whip, which is 125 grams of each. We're going to combine these, let it bloom, let it whip. We'll add our honey, take it to a raw meringue, and then pipe it on the plate or spoon it on the plate. We'll see. And we'll let that do its thing while we do our thing. So that's 125 grams of water, 4 grams of Versa Whip, 2 grams of xanthan gum. We'll just start by gently kind of incorporating this into the water. We kind of get this to a point that sort of resembles egg whites in here. We're going to go ahead and add our honey. We're close. Kind of a lighter, brighter, like I said, kind of just this heavenly approach to honey. If the honey has these bright, like clean floral notes, quite nice with vegetables, herbs, flowers, anything. You really want to get this to a point where, it's still fluid at room temperature. You have, when you cook any sugars to really high temperatures, you get to a point where you just can't work with it. And in this case, as like, spooning it over something. If we wanted to turn this into a marshmallow, we could, but we're going to loosen it up until it's, fluid at room temperature. I'm also kind of allowing the spoon to kind of do that dispersion for us with the vinegar. So typically, when we're cooking with savory applications of honey, we add a lot of salt, right? We like to season pretty aggressively a dish because, by nature, we're just finding balance with the sweetness of the honey. We've added a lot of bitter notes today to honey by just cooking it to 300 and, 15 degrees. And allowing it to hang out there for a minute and caramelize some of those sugars. I'm going to take this, we're going to spoon this essentially vinaigrette now over the squash. The burnt honey has been loosened with water and sherry vinegar, and aged sherry. You can use anything, you don't have to. But I'm going to kind of spoon this over each one of these squash. We'll take some raw squash. Take some squash blossoms. You know, this time of year, cooking's just so much easier. We'll take our whipped honey. You know, you could use a piping bag here if you want. And then we get into the fun stuff, the things the bees were after this morning. It's such a natural combination of ingredients, a beautiful play on the seasons. Sunflower pollen. And in this dish, we let the bees guide us. As we walked through the garden today and just watched as they do their thing. We have seared squash with burnt honey and raw squash with raw whipped honey. We have an assortment of flowers and herbs from the garden that seem to draw the bees in. As a result, it drew us in, and here we are. We are grateful for our partnership with the National Honey Board to be working together on inspiration, using an ingredient that we all love so much is a really just an unbelievable opportunity, and we hope you enjoy.